So welcome to the Stoa, everyone. I'm calling in from Copenhagen at the moment, and I apologize about the lighting system. This is the best one I could muster here. And today we have our good friend, the return of Joe Edelman, founder and wizard of the School of Social Design, where I was a student a few years ago. He was the CTO of Couchsurfing, and it's probably one of the best models and philosophizing on values I've ever seen. I highly recommend checking it out, and perhaps I'll put some in the video notes. He used to have a series here in our Wisdom Gym, the Social Design Club, which was quite fun, and just feeling into what today's session is going to be like. So some of that magic of the Social Design Club will be returning here to the Stoa. And so Joe sent me an article, I think about a month ago or a couple of weeks ago, on something that he called the weird-trepreneur versus the same-preneur, and I'll let him describe that distinction. And he said, Peter, you came to mind when I thought about weird-trepreneur, and then I read it, and I'm like, oh, it's a nice compliment. And so I'm like, let's have a session at the Stoa. So here we are today, going to talk about weird-trepreneurs, and he's going to offer some other models that we can play with. And I'm going to tag in Joe in a moment, and Joe is just going to, the keys are handed to him. So I'm somewhat nervous and excited at the same time. And so the protocols, we're going to be a little loose. It's going to be interactive, and Joe will explain that more in a moment. So that being said, welcome back to the Stoa, my friend. There you go. You're on mute.
Hey everyone, it's good to be back. It's really good. It's a funny thing, like seeing all these faces from all around the world. Like I think especially because of that music, it makes me feel like this is epic, and it is kind of epic. Okay, I'm here today to test a kind of hypothesis, and I would like all of your help in helping me figure out whether it's a good one or it's true. And so the hypothesis is that there's two kinds of entrepreneurs, and that there's actually a significant number of both, but that the word entrepreneur kind of confuses two different types of people building two different types of things. And so I want to tell you a little bit about those two different types of entrepreneurship that I'm talking about, and then see if this kind of distinction or this concept can hold us, like to see if we can all think of good examples of both kinds. If some of us identify as one kind of entrepreneur or another, and then if that all works out, then I also want to talk a little bit as a group about what it would take to support the less supported kind of entrepreneur, the one that I'm calling a weird-trepreneur. Or that I called that in this essay. So that's the kind of outline, is that I start by explaining this distinction. Then we sort of check in as a group to see if the distinction actually makes any sense. And then we go from there. And if there's not any questions about that, I think I will start by sharing my screen and talking through this. And it looks like I can. Talking through this distinction. So hopefully you can all see this little diagram. I'll make it a little bigger even. So the idea is that some people that call themselves entrepreneurs are making what I'm calling funnels, and some are making what here in the diagram I call spaces. So a funnel is when you're driving a lot of people through a transaction. You're trying to get a lot of people to buy vitamin supplements, like our good friends Daniel Schmachtenberger and Jordan Hall, or a lot of people to download your app, share a video, buy any kind of product or whatever. And funnel is the word that marketers use for the sequence of steps that people take on their way to a purchase or a download or whatever. And funnels optimize for certain things, predictably going from each step to the next, losing as few people as possible as you advance them towards the transaction, Usually funnels are solo, so you go through the funnel as an individual consumer or clicker or viewer. And the alternative is what I'm calling a space, which is, so some entrepreneurs focus mostly on the funnel and some focus mostly on the space. I think it's a little hard to draw the distinction because even what I'm calling a space usually has some funnels that go into it. So the Stoa, you have to like go to the website, or you have to click the Zoom link, RSVP, maybe even donate on Patreon. So those are kind of funnels that have to do with the Stoa. Burning Man, you have to buy a ticket. Universities, you have to apply, admitted, or whatever. So there's some funnels. And what I kind of want to point to is, does the entrepreneur spend most of their time ramping the funnel, trying to get as many people to download, click, or whatever, or developing the space? And my kind of hypothesis is that entrepreneurs really do split in these into these two categories. That Peter, I think, is not ramping the funnels of a Stoa. He's not driving those metrics, getting as many, and there's no transaction that's involved with the Stoa. RSVPs, Patreon subscribers, YouTube subscribers, none of these transactions have been like kind of methodically and systematically optimized by Peter. But it seems like this other set of concerns, which we're much worse at measuring for now, has been kind of systematically tweaked and optimized, which is the concerns of the Stoa as a space. So, and I guess what a space is, or I called it a playground in one of my essays. It's a place that has the opposite attributes of a funnel. So instead of trying to make people predictably click down one path, you're trying to optimize for surprise, for even being surprised at what your own users or participants or visitors do. Instead of keeping people separate and atomized, you try to embed them in new, they make friends, or they learn new practices. Instead of getting them to do a transaction, ideally, I think space makers or weird-trepreneurs try to get people to do explorations with each other, which is kind of the opposite of a transaction, because transaction is instantaneous and exploration takes time. And a transaction is like a known entity, and exploration is an unknown entity. Instead of dealing with people as just like a big mass of subscribers or whatever, a space tries to encourage subgroups and diversity. And I think there's also a goals versus values distinction between funnels and spaces, but I won't go into that. So my first question to the group is, and I think I'll, does this make sense? Like, can you in your own mind, can you think of some examples of funnel entrepreneurs or same-preneur, as I called it in this essay, versus space entrepreneurs, playground entrepreneurs, weird-trepreneurs? And does this sort of cleanly separate, or is this maybe just like adding noise?
I think you do both, right? Like if you're going to be super successful, you're a funnel and a space, and you make, like, use Trump as an example, great at funneling and great at creating a space for people who share his values to connect and sort of grow that movement. The results of it are still, being observed.
Do you think, so you would say the rallies are an example of a Trump space?
Yeah, I think so. They're all about him, right? Like he's always about, like, it's about him. He puts his name on buildings. He doesn't own the buildings. Like he's a marketing guy who sells his name. It's like, from a business perspective, it's genius.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with his genius, but I'm wondering whether the rally would count as a space.
Ooh, good question. I don't know.
Yeah. Other thoughts from the crowd?
Would you call Twitter a space?
I do think that Twitter has some space. Like the platforms are really interesting hybrids of both of these, and none of them, and a third thing like a meta funnel. Yeah, it's complicated. Sarah raised her hand.
Yes, my feeling was like there was two things inside this slide. Like on one side, you've got the focus on the vertical versus creating an ecosystem. But then my feeling was between the Stoa and other ecosystem was my feeling is that the Stoa is first focused on a mission and you're trying after to make a living out of it, and some other ecosystems or verticals are first focused on making business. And mission is also here, but my feeling is it's different if your first focus is profit maximizing or if it's a mission while earning profit. So it's just for me, it would be like a bit more complexity inside the presentation. I don't know if it makes sense.
It's related, but it seems to me like there's plenty of nonprofit funnels. For instance, if your mission is to get bed nets to as many people in Southern Africa as possible, that's definitely driving a funnel, or get to laptops for every child. That's definitely like a funnel driving nonprofit with a mission.
That's a great example, because that's GiveWell's top charity, right? Is AMF, Against Malaria Foundation. So there's a huge focus within effective altruism, massive funnel there, right?
Yeah.
This diagram makes me think of the finite versus infinite games philosophy by James Carse. I feel like the funnel is the finite game and the space is the infinite game. And it doesn't mean that one needs, I think in the philosophy as well, in James's philosophy, both have to exist, and both, like, there are finite games within infinite games and there are infinite games kind of. That's what it makes me think of. I see some nodding. I don't know if you guys agree.
Do you think, like, if people think through entrepreneurs they know, or even themselves, do they tend to focus more on one or the other? Like, can you kind of group people in your mind fairly cleanly into the way I grouped Peter as a weird-trepreneur?
I feel like there are definitely people who see the infinite game, and then people who don't, maybe as readily. Like the people who do see the infinite game, I think, and value it, they would focus on the space. I've like worked with people or seen classmates who don't necessarily believe in the infinite game. They're just like, dude, life is a game. You win, you're either bigger dog, or smaller dog, big fish, smaller fish. And then my hypothesis is that those people focus on the funnel.
Can I just say, I've actually gotten to the point where I started to distinguish different folks in the same space who are, we call same-preneurs versus weird-trepreneurs, and I actually try and opt to buy from the weird-trepreneurs, and I can often tell the difference between someone literally in the same space who's doing it differently, and I'll choose, and bias myself towards the person who's creating more of the space. A lot of times, from my perspective, the perception is, one person's trying to maximize profit, another person is trying to do something and make a living while doing it. So that distinction is important to me.
I'd love some examples of, and also like, how can you tell?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I come from a background where, it's anthropology, so I try and read a lot for the language and a lot of the assumptions behind the way the person speaks. So to, full disclosure, I'm an astrologer, and so there are astrologers who I buy things from and whose worlds I participate in because I really feel that they are truly trying to add to the community, whereas in other cases, it's interesting. The other ones will talk about, shadow work and actually more outwardly spiritual, but I actually sense that there's more of a sort of, there's more shadow work to be done. There's more of a profit complex going on. And part of it I can tell by the funnels because there, one makes, speaking more literally, one makes a lot of free resources available, and the other one starts calling them free resources, but they're constantly trying to sell the product and they plug them into virtually everything. Now, that doesn't mean that they're a same-preneur or whatever you call it, but over time you start to notice these distinctions, and there are other things that I can't quite get into here, maybe that are indicating those patterns for me. So that's a distinction that I'm starting to notice, which is sometimes in the same field you have people who are taking different approaches, and I try and see what I can do to support those who are trying to create these spaces that invite more people in without charging you $1,700 up front before you even know what you're getting into.
I wonder, Elliot has his hand raised, and you can speak next, Elliot. But I have another question to throw out that maybe somebody will have some thoughts about after Elliot, which is, I wonder if anybody knows somebody who would be a space-trepreneur or a weird-trepreneur, but because there's so much more material about about funnel optimizing, there's so much to read, there's so many incubators and accelerators and so on and so forth, they're kind of screwing up doing the standard, because they want to be an entrepreneur, they want to be a founder, they're focusing kind of on the wrong things, not because they actually want to, but just because that's the kind of the beaten path. That's another question I have. Elliot, go ahead.
Thanks. The two things that come to mind, one are the parallel between product and membership. So seems like funnels are about selling a product, a very transactional thing, whereas spaces are about creating a membership. And then the other side is from the motivation standpoint, and this speaks to your last question. It seems that the same-preneur is really, for lack of a better term, profit focused, whereas it doesn't seem the same about the weird-preneur. They have some other motivation. And I think, yes, for sure, in the noosphere, in the business noosphere, there's much more emphasis on product and profit than there is on purpose, whatever that happens to be, and place.
Jason and then Ben.
Yeah, I immediately wonder, part of me goes immediately to the motivation aspect, that it comes down to the motivation. And then another part of me wonders, is it actually beyond that? Is it like is it a view of what the world actually is actually below the motivation? And is that the main distinction?
What do you like, whether the world is a funnel or like in a finite game or an infinite game? Is that what you mean, Jason?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I mean a deeper understanding of what the world is and how it operates. Like, yeah, I also immediately went to the finite and infinite game model, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like I work with a lot of people who or like organizations who like just can't grasp the idea of the infinite game because they've only ever lived one, the finite game. So I guess it's like, is the weird-trepreneur the person who can hold the vision of this other world in this way that the funnel preneur cannot?
Sure. Ben.
Yeah, just it reminds me, it's not quite entrepreneurs, but as a teacher, when I taught in a school, actually the system is definitely pushing all the teachers to become same-trepreneurs, because using the same metrics for everyone to measure everybody's success, everybody's learning process. And there are many teachers who would want to be weird-trepreneurs, but the system around that is not supporting them. I think it tends to come often like higher up, where it might be the principal, or it might be whoever's on top of the principal, or it might just be like the Ministry of Education that's kind of focusing that. And I noticed in homeschooling communities, there is not 100%, but a lot more of the weird-trepreneur kind of vibe, where it's kind of like, we do this, where we have this type of schedule, and you do something different. And as a community, we're kind of exploring learning, but trading techniques and not coercing or measuring things the same way.
Yeah, one of my hunches here is that we have a shortage of ways to measure success in weird-trepreneurship, and a lot of very clear, simple ways to measure success in funnels. And this is leading even funders or governments to lean, and effective altruists to lean into funnels because they're easier to measure the success of, when they're actually worse for everybody. But if you're a funder or a government or a large nonprofit, you do need to have some, you need to know when it makes sense to give another grant, when not. You need some sense of whether you're being responsible with your money, directing it to the right place, whether things are working. And since there's such poor analytics for weird-trepreneurs or spaces, this creates a bias in this kind of way. Let's see, Joy and then David.
Okay, hi. I was just gonna talk about, I think, kind of follow up on something that Jason mentioned earlier about worldview. I feel like the people who don't see the infinite games or don't believe in that infinite games like philosophy, it tends to be because of like trauma or pain that they've experienced like early in their life. And it kind of like touches upon like the word you used, Joe, of a playground versus like a playground space versus a funnel. It's like if you feel safe enough to play, that means you believe in the ability to survive and play and not compete. And that's why I kind of like sometimes I mentioned that those classmates earlier. It's like those classmates, I kind of pity them in some ways, like because it just shows that they must have experienced something like that completely made them cynical about like living in this happy-go-lucky rainbows world, which maybe all weird-trepreneurs are idealistic to that level.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. I think so too. David.
Yeah, I put a comment in just around the language of weird-trepreneur. Like I'm curious, like why, like it seems like entrepreneur is being tacked on as a suffix, and just wanted to dig into more around that. Like in my mind, entrepreneurships. Like I think I heard Mark Gaffney say, entrepreneurs are the Jedi Knights of our time, right? Like entrepreneurs get elevated to this like mythic level in some ways, and so are we trying to use that status to kind of raise the ship of the weirdpreneur, or like, because a lot of the folks who put it into that category, I think just would be community organizers or space holders, and they just have such a different orientation. So it's like the market dynamics around money or status of the term. Just wanting to unpack that a little.
I have a reason for it that's not that reason, which I'll tell you. I don't think it's a good reason, and I don't think I'll stick with the weird-trepreneur title. I prefer the funnel. I prefer, instead of distinguishing the people, distinguishing the thing that they're making. So I think funnel versus playground or funnel versus space, I'm liking better than weird-trepreneur versus same-preneur. But the reason that I do this is because I do think there's a big difference between people who start things and people like there's an identity that's built around starting things that I think is a good one. Like I want to encourage people to start all sorts of things, clubs, community organizations, things like the Stoa, weekly card game nights or whatever. And I actually do want to encourage people to think of themselves as starters or founders or originators of something or other. And so that's something I like about the word entrepreneur, and there's not really a very good alternative that I know of for that.
Can I jump in there, Joe? I don't know how to do my hand raising. So just to double click on that comment that was previously shared. When I initially started the Stoa, like I had no intention of it making money or anything. I was just going through a crazy moment in my life and I had nothing better to do. So I just wanted to give a gift to the world. And all I knew how to do was just combine my podcast, my in-person meetings, which I couldn't make, and combine it into this thing. And I framed it not in the market economy, but in the gift economy, right? And I didn't even know if that was accurate or not. But just that framing felt like it unlocked whatever emerged from this thing for the last 2 years. So I like that idea of giving a gift. And I mentioned that because it's, the entrepreneur thing, like that meta label that you're using for the same-preneur, weird-preneur playground spaces, entrepreneur never really fit with me initially, even though I might be one now. I thought I'd share that.
Yeah, but I guess the word that I use in my classes is social designer, like to mean someone who thinks about how any kind of more than one person social construct could be set up. And I wish if anybody has a good idea for like this thing would include anybody who develops a practice, like an interpersonal practice, like authentic relating or something. It would include anybody who invents a board game, multiplayer. It would include anybody who starts a club. It would include anybody who starts a business. So I don't know what a good word for that is, but I would love to have one. Maybe Mathieu?
Hi, Joseph. Hi, Peter. I would like to submit another observation based upon your findings. But for me, it reminds me what Alan Watts used to say, the prickly and the gooey. It's like triangle is prickly, and round is GUI. And you could say the round looks like an eye, and the funnel is like the field of vision from the eye.
Sure.
And maybe it's like you have people who have like big eyes. They look very very curious. That's why they have big eyes, and they want to put out their vision into the world. So those are like the visionaries, the value creators. And then you have the other ones. They're the one who wants to shine, like they want to be pretty, look at me. So they want to appropriate the field of vision, And so in a way, you kind of need both. But it's like maybe we've got too much funnel. So people like prickly, I want to be seen, so much prickly, that in a way it becomes exhausting. And so now we need to find a bit more balance, but perhaps a bit more GUI would be great.
I like that. It's very poetic reading of the diagram. So I guess maybe I'll back up a little bit and ask if anyone here feels like they're a weird-trepreneur or a space maker or a playground maker, and that like that label helps in some way, because that's kind of my question. Like, does this help? Adam, you have something to say?
Sure. Yeah, I tuned in because I read the article you shared prior to this, and I think a label does help, because it can be kind of an ambiguous position, right? If you're at the helm of a community, or you're the nucleus, or like the center of gravity of a community, and it's like growing around you. What do you call yourself, right? Particularly if it's a technical community of practice. People are like, oh, are you, like, I come from a tech arts collective, and people are like, are you an engineer? Are you a developer? Are you an artist? And I was like, I'm not really any of those things, but I'm kind of all those things. But I'm really just like excited, and I want you all to get excited with me, and I want to make things, right? So I think a label definitely helps.
Cool. Alex.
Sorry, yeah, Zoom controls and all that. Yeah, absolutely. So totally don't shy away from being weird. The EA folks have this, or the rationality folks have this nonsense concept of you only get so many weird points. I read that wrong, and I thought it meant you should try to do like Pokemon and collect them all and go all in on being weird. And it seems actually that works really, really well. So I shilled this session yesterday. Angel Investors Ontario had free tickets, in-person event in Toronto. And so I invited a ton of people to it. 5 of them actually showed up. 2 people from Complexity Weekend, 1 person from Effective Altruism, and 2 other people. And I introduced them to a ton of people there. There's the just amazing opportunity to dig into things. And who knows, maybe it was just because of COVID and pandemic. It was a big event, sort of in COVID. And so maybe not as many people showed up who normally would have. But I think there's lots of these opportunities we can tap into and just be weird, like go in and do crazy, weird things, but be open to learning. And that's the big problem with effective altruism, is they try to figure out everything ahead of time. And it's better to, be like a Richard Branson or something and just go out and like do stuff, get attention. Like he runs a business based on not having to pay for advertising. It's a genius business. And anyway, I could go on and on. This is such a good topic. I like weird-trepreneur. I can't say it right, but I do like the concept of being an Edelman, and I would like to be an Edelman, so I'm going to change my name to Edelman.
Wow, I've got a fan. But by the way, I'm not like really attached to any particular, and I actually think one of the problems with weird-trepreneur is that I actually hope that this gets a lot less weird. Like, I think whoever mentioned community organizers had a good point. I think that there's a very long history of doing this kind of work, but there hasn't really been a label that goes around just the part that I'm emphasizing. And so that's what I'm asking about, like whether that distinction helps, not whether the specific. I think the specific word weird-trepreneur has to go, because I want it to feel very accessible. Sarah.
So maybe as an example of, so 6 years ago, I started an open source mapping on impact investing fund in France, just with a friend, just because we thought it was important and it was really lacking and prevented the sector from being democratic. And so we started to build a community, but it was really just because we felt there was an issue and we aimed for something more fair. And it so happened that we started to have opportunities of business around, and my friend did build a business on raising monies and impact finance directors. So this is kind of a funnel. But my feeling was at the beginning, we were kind of weird-trepreneurs, just as you say, because we were just building this community, organizing events, building this tool with a first aim of meeting people around this area, looking for people seeing the same problem as us. And well, yeah, after one of us chose to build a funnel fully commercial, for me, I focused on something else. So I don't know if it subscribes to your vision.
Does it still have both aspects, like a funnel? Like Burning Man, for instance, has like a funnel and a space, and the space is very alive, or whatever. Stoa also has funnels and spaces, or did the funnel part kind of grow and the space part kind of shrink as your friend took over? What happened?
Well, yes, because we built it when the community on this area was absolutely non-existent here, and then we started to see many funnels, much more commercial building. And as well, I had another job. So either you didn't have really a choice. You had to become a funnel or you disappeared at such time, or you had to grow quickly. Otherwise, the value added was not high enough. It was high enough for like 2-3 years. But yeah, after it was too structured.
Yeah, this is I think a real problem. Like I think that the space makers have a huge disadvantage in kind of like modern metrics capitalism, especially for virtual things. Like for a cafe or something, it doesn't need to grow and grow and grow. It can just as long as it breaks even. But for virtual things, they get crowded out by whatever is growing. And I have some ideas about how to solve that problem, but it's a big problem. Who's next? Adam, you have your hand up?
Oops, I forgot to put it down.
Oh, okay. Then Edelman.
Hey, I take it that means me. One metaphor I've thought about, or I've sort of been thinking about lately, instead of the like playground, is Ryan Holiday, he's like a pop stoic. He has something called the canvas strategy, where you sort of provide canvases for other people to paint on. And like, he means it in one way, but one way I've thought about is like a playground could be like you make a canvas for other people to paint on. And like, so let's see, I was thinking about like, and designing a canvas is interesting because you have to sort of make it so that it's just like easily usable enough for like people like to have a low enough barrier of entry, but like complicated enough to make the things that people can paint on actually interesting. And I feel like for example, like, you know, Roblox or something, or Minecraft, because, you know, the metaverse is big right now. Like that's like a playground, but it's also a canvas where like you can sort of, people can make their own little Roblox games. And that's like almost a little virtual canvas for people to paint on, albeit a more complex one.
Yeah. I think the canvas framing might be better than mine. It doesn't capture the sociality that I want to capture, like the embedded versus atomized. But yeah, playground has some big problems too, so maybe we can figure it out. Okay, Edelman Delta variant.
Wow, I just wanted to hear you say that. So I don't know if being a same-preneur, whatever, would be everybody changing their name to Edelman and doing the same thing, or just leaving your name as is. So it's kind of this interesting dynamic where what's considered normal changes. Like if half of us changed our name to Edelman, would it be weird not to be an Edelman? And would those of us who are Edelmans just be followers? I don't know. It's a fascinating dynamic, I think.
I guess what I meant by, you've taken weird in a direction that I didn't mean, which is like I just meant the difference between getting everybody to be predictable versus building a container that might be surprising. That's what I meant. So I meant the difference. By weird, I meant surprising, like that the things that happen inside the thing you're building are not supposed to be predictable. You don't win. Success doesn't mean that you predicted that people all buy your thing, but that you kind of are setting things up to be surprising. And yeah, I think weird wasn't maybe the best word for that. Edelman?
Yeah, I think the surprise is interesting because the canvas sort of, it goes with that like atomized kind of thing where each person's working on their own canvas. But if you can, yeah, I think between the interactions, that's where some of the surprise can come from. So maybe providing canvases that, I think that's sort of making the canvases that are interesting enough, right? Where people can be like, oh, that's a surprising way to use the canvas. And then maybe the meme of how that person used the canvas can spread throughout the playground. So maybe that's like how to make, designing good canvases so that there's intra playground virality is possibly one way to look at it.
Yeah, sure. I have another question to throw out. And I'd also love to hear from people who haven't spoken, and maybe from Peter, who has kind of identified as a weird-trepreneur. And the question is, like, if there was a community of weird-trepreneurs or space makers or playground makers, like there's like these big things for if you're going to launch a startup or a funnel thing, like Y Combinator, all these different accelerators and things like that. And I'm wondering what would be the equivalent in weird-trepreneurship or space making. What's the way that you could get outside help, support, that you could network with other weird-trepreneurs or space makers that would be helpful? This is a big open question that I have, and I guess maybe it would help if like those of you who think of yourselves as weird-trepreneurs already speak, or if you imagine a project that is a kind of a space making or weird-trepreneurship project that you have, what kind of help would be relevant, or community? Mark?
Yeah, I guess I feel like the people who want to be, you guys may disagree, but the people who want to be weird-trepreneurs are very focused on the space, the mission, the play. And usually, I could be wrong, but I think the challenge is the funnel. The challenge is, how can I make this viable in the real world? So I feel like a help that could be done would be around helping projects be viable. And like, I don't know, it'd be interesting to do an analysis, like what are the 10 or 15 different business models that support different organizations, and which, the 80-20 rule, 80% of them do this, and this just helps them. So it's almost like you're giving somebody a little structure that they can take. And as long as they like the funnels in a way are predictable, like if you could help people make predictable the survival aspect, I feel like, and like someone could almost just like consulting. It's like, hey, I'm trying to launch this community, or I'm trying to launch this effort. Like, okay, well, these 3 or 4 models are usually successful in supporting something like what you're trying to do. And maybe there's just this other 4th type. It's unproven. We haven't seen it. You could try that out. Just a thought.
Oh, I love that idea. I think that's a great idea. Thank you. I'm kind of tempted to set that up. Mark.
Oh, that's me again. Let me put my hand down.
Oh, sorry. There was somebody else, but Natalia.
Hi. I was excited about this event because I actually recently realized that my new title for myself is post-capitalist playground builder. And what that means to me is actually being able to go around and help to build communities, but not necessarily have to continue maintaining them forever or have to grow them. And then the post-capitalist was an important aspect of it, because I think the playground space exists for me in like beyond and outside of the capitalist relations of like growth and marketization. And so I'm both a post-capitalist person and I want to build post-capitalist playgrounds. So I am feeling some tension around this entrepreneur language that has come up, because playgrounds are these like anarchic voluntary spaces where anybody can come in at any point, and play in the ways that they want. And also, like, you could have a really great time with like one other person on a playground, right, for several hours. It might be kind of boring to be on a playground by yourself. So you might need one other person at least. Yeah, so I am feeling a little bit of a tension of trying to create playgrounds that are entrepreneurized and are like, I feel like it's like creating kind of this like internal contradiction in what's so alive and possible and expansive about the playground concept.
The thing that I want to emphasize is the starting, like you were saying. Like I like there's a couple different things. Yeah, I think the starting and the maintenance are very different, which you brought up. And I don't know. There's not very many good words for starter, like founder and entrepreneur. The other thing is that I really do believe in design. Like I think there are great like actual physical playgrounds. Like some of them are brilliant, and some of them are shitty. And it's the same with community structures, different like legal structures for stewardship of communities and governance structures and onboarding, or, you know, so that like all of these things, these social aspects of things like spaces or playgrounds can be, you know, inspired or not. And so I want to honor the people that are doing this work, making an inspired playground or community space or whatever, with some status, like not pretending that it's like somehow just emerges from the community. Like it doesn't actually. There's some like brilliant people who set something up in a very in a way that should be honored, and then the community comes in and they make it their own. But I do really want to reserve some kind of special term for the person who started it or figured out how to set it up in an inspired way.
If I can jump in,
yeah.
Joe, is double click on that and to circle back to your original question. There's like at least three like kind of things that I personally would get benefit if there was like a community of weird-trepreneurs or just like social playground makers, designers. And the first one is the one you just mentioned, is having a community of like designers, and we're just trading best practices and tips and stuff. Because I learned so much of the Stoa space from you, like taking your course at Human Systems at the time, someone like Richard Bartlett, from like my friend Angie Strickler, from like Anna Gatt from Interintellect, you know, just seeing them from afar, and then befriending her. Just like all these are social designers, playground designers. And then there's all these that do different things differently. The vibe of Interintellect is different than the Stoa, but we're informing each other, learning from each other. I just love that, you know, so just having a community where we can have our own playground to like make the playgrounds would be delicious for me. If it was more like, I guess, explicit and we met regularly or something like that.
Yeah, that's another thing that I want to do. I guess I like that. I really like that. Yeah, so maybe I'm going to try to make as many of these things happen. I mean, it will take months, but I'll try to make some of these things happen because I really do want to support this kind of person. Peter, did you say there were three things and you just said one?
Yeah. So the one was like kind of like best practices for design. The second one would be like tactical stuff. Like, and that this I guess relates to the funnel. And what I like about this diagram, funnel versus space, is like, which one are you holding intrinsic? Which one are you holding instrumental? We need the funnels if you're just your intrinsic thing is the space. And I find a lot of people who are like good, they just want to do like, you know, they plug in the spirit of quote unquote game B, and they're like, I want to create a podcast. And then just adopt the whole script of like how to do like, you know, the normal way of doing a podcast. And it just kind of like contorts and configures their spirit of what they want to do in a way that just like funnelizes the project. And if there was like you said it when we were talking offline, if there's like a playbook that you can happen, like, oh wait, there's all these like tools out there, like these mediums that we have to use, YouTube does stuff like that, but we don't have to adopt the scripts that go on with them. Like the Stoa, we don't have to enable comments. We don't have to say crush the like button. You know, we don't have to have this fancy thumbnail. You can do things differently. And so having kind of like a slew of tactics might encourage me to use other platforms that I don't currently use. Like kind of like I just got a bad vibe of Clubhouse. So I don't use it because I'm like, okay, that's just a funnel system, but maybe it doesn't have to be used as it. And then the third one, what was the third one again? Oh yeah, just investment. Like the Stoa, like it was just all me. Like I'm pretty much the main administrative person, and I received no outside investment. In about 2 years, I'm supporting my livelihood from it. But still, like if someone wants to like give me money, like or a grant or something, like I take it. But I haven't sought that out because I don't know where to, and it just feels like there'd be strings attached and all that type of stuff. But if there was a source or some awareness community that invests weird-trepreneurs or social designers in this sense, that would be awesome to be aware of that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay, Reed.
Yeah, thanks. Peter's commentary there just kind of added some clarification for me about what this is, I guess. It seems like you're onto something interesting. I'm still trying to get my hands around the kind of distinction of the funnel and the space and the weird-trepreneur and the same-preneur. Because I had this example of Apple come into my head. And like Apple does not seem like weird-trepreneur at all. Seems to have both elements of funnel and space. Like they design an ecosystem in which any person who understands their language can create whatever they want. So it's kind of the App Store is an unpredictable kind of ecosystem. And yet you have to go through their exact funnel to access it. It's a walled garden. So I guess to just kind of backtrack and maybe help me out with some sort of like distinction, or maybe they're not as distinct as I am sensing into they might be. I don't know, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there's some things that I didn't, everything in the world is not either a funnel or a space. There's some other things that I didn't. So I think I think there are meta funnels, you might call them, and there are toolkits. And I think Apple and Ethereum and many other things are better under, and many APIs are better understood as toolkits, and then many of the web platforms are I would call them meta funnels. So a toolkit is something that, like a space, is very supportive, and a toolkit is not. A toolkit is just a bunch of things that you can build from, like an erector set or whatever. And this is great. Like I don't think everything should be a space or a funnel. Like I think toolkits are great, but it's definitely like a thing that's not a funnel or a space. And so I would say, like, yeah, most SDKs, APIs, things like that, like there's a tendency towards making toolkits. And then the platforms, including the App Store, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube especially, I would call meta funnels. They're funnels that make their money by directing people into other things, which can be funnels or spaces. So most of Peter's competitors on YouTube are also running a funnel. They're trying to get as many subscribers and so on and so forth. But you don't have to run a funnel on YouTube. You can also run a space. Same in the App Store, right? So these are like funnels that lead mostly to other funnels, but sometimes to spaces. So we could call that a meta funnel. So there's two other kinds of things that kind of round out this taxonomy. Does that help?
It helps a little bit. I think this is a little bit above my pay grade, like SDKs and stuff like that. I kind of know what that is, but yeah, that was somewhat helpful. Thanks.
Cool. There was somebody who disappeared, but I guess they're gone. Somebody else had their hand raised, but we can go with complexity. Weekend is a playground.
Yeah, that's basically it. That's all I had to say.
Okay, cool. Peter, what do you think we should do? Oh, there's somebody. Jason is back.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I do a lot of work in playful learning and actually designing physical playgrounds. And one of the things that we try to do is just create spaces that are open-ended for basically you discover and explore and determine like what what it is that you're actually in. And like just kind of like leaving, I think another thing that keeps coming to mind is the concept of the imaginal, and allowing that, like the imaginal realm being the place where like almost like a pre-actuality space of exploration. So the imaginal being something that happens before a possibility, but expands the possibility horizon. So I see that as something that I just wanted to throw in there.
Yeah, I do think that's maybe the imaginal is something that distinguishes what I was just calling a toolkit and a space. Like, I think something in a space, and like an adventure playground is an interesting kind of crossover where there's less there, but hopefully there's still enough to kind of spark your imagination, which makes it more of a space than just like Legos. Joy.
I have a question about the dangers of being a person or entrepreneur focused on the space. I wrote it in the chat as well, and I think David gave an answer. I'm just curious, like, we're familiar with the dangers of being a funnel-focused entrepreneur. You know, you miss out on the benefits of a space, and maybe you just focus on transactions and it doesn't feel good. But what are the potential pitfalls and bad actors in a space-focused entrepreneurial group? Like, there must be downsides as well, related to like whether it's financials, or maybe, you know, you become a cult leader who makes everyone feel like they're part of a space, but you actually feed them poison Kool-Aid. Like, what are the dangers here?
Anybody, you have some ideas, Joy, or do other people have ideas?
I feel like it has the potential to become a cult, and where you're like, oh man, we're so special, we're so much better than everyone else, and if you're part of us, then you have to act by this rule, and if you don't, then you're not part of us. And
I mean, not by my definition of space here. I was reading recently Zoe Kersey's kind of expose of leverage research. Has anybody read that? Great document, really horrifying. So this is like the inside experience of a cult among effective altruists, actually. Yay, effective altruists and cults. And I think one of the things that leverage did very, very wrong, and the sort of bad kinds of cults do very, very wrong, is they have a notion of ideal character, like a kind of person that everybody is trying to be. In leverage, it was Elon Musk. At Maple, maybe it's Soryu. Like there's different, you know, it's for Christians, a lot of them it's Jesus or some model of Jesus or whatever. And when you have this idea that everybody, like that, ideally you do this practice, maybe you meditate or you do belief reporting or whatever, and you become this particular type of guy that everybody's trying to become. This is definitely more of a funnel kind of thing, right? Like the goal is to get to being that guy. And that's not a space, because a space is surprising, it's based on explorations, and it's divergent instead of convergent. So I think if we widely adopted this definition of space, then cults would not be, that kind of cult, the convergent kind of cult, wouldn't be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely that notion of an ideal person. I see it type, but I'll stop talking so other people can talk.
Just
cool. Who's next? I read. Yeah.
I was just going to add on to maybe just what she was asking about dangers of these spaces, which seems like kind of the opposite of what you're saying, Joseph. If there isn't any ideal character, and you just provide an open space for people to act however they want, then you're not actually trying to imagine ahead of time what product you're trying to create, then you can be a magnet for bad actors. And then that just kind of seems to me to be the most obvious failure case of a kind of purely open space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't. This is another reason I don't like the word space. Like, I would, for instance, include a jazz jam session or poetry performance poetry night under the heading of space for sure. I think it checks all the boxes, but it's still very constrained in terms of what's allowed. Like, you can't go to the jazz jam session and do stand-up comedy. So it's not that a space. I think I should need a word besides space too. It's not that it's unconstrained. It can be constrained. And I about bad actors, I think I guess it depends on what the space is for. Like, it seems like some kinds of, like, I'm not sure that jazz nights are full of bad actors or capoeira groups. But some kinds of playgrounds would attract them for sure.
I just want to be cognizant of the time, Joe. We're at the top of the hour. Do you want to field any more questions or conclude shortly?
Just catching up on the chat. There's so many nice things here. I think not. Maybe I'll just say that if you like, so I think Reed and Peter and Joy and someone else all gave things that they would like to get out of a community for this type of person. And if you're one of those people, please get in touch with me. I can leave my email in the chat right now, because I would love to build this community. It will take me a while, but I would love to try to figure out how to gather all these things. Funding structures, actual funding, best practices, community among people who could share best practices, everything that everybody said is something that I would like to inch towards being able to nurture or provide in some way.
Two things came up with when Joy and then Reed were just talking about like the cult thing, and some people like playfully kind of like, oh, the Stoa is like cult, but as in a joking way. And I was like, kind of like, I don't like that, because there's a difference in cult and culture. But yeah, there's something there. Like, I'm a Stoic, a practicing Stoic. I journal to myself, Stoic journaling. I don't think I converted one person to Stoicism through like almost the 2 years of hosting the Stoa. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then with Reed's comments about what was it again? What was we talking about? Something? Can you, Joe, if you can refresh my memory on that?
Yeah, a few different things, but he was talking about bad actors just now.
Yeah, I thought I had something good with Reed's comment. Oh yeah. So yeah, like you need to have some kind of standards. You can't just let anyone in. And I think one criteria I have with the Stoa is like, does this person have the capacity to hold space? This is like the term that a lot of people in the intersubjective, like practitioners movement, like collective presencing or circling, can this person really hold space for them and doesn't make that conversational narcissistic move where they point the finger back at them or their ego? And I can feel when someone has that, like you have a discernment to do it. And I invite those people in and give them the keys to the Stoa for using it, like I did with you today. So that's I don't know what's if that's something there, a principle we can tease out, but that's the capacity to hold space, I think, is quite important for these spaces that Joe were talking about. So that being said, much love and gratitude to you, my friend, for holding space so beautifully today at the Stoa. Love to have you back. And yeah, maybe we can put some kind of survey or something embedded in the video description, so anyone who watches this, they can just fill it out and connect with us in this project. So that could be a cool thing.
Yeah, great idea. Cool. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone. So thank you so much for coming to the Stoa. You can check out other events at thestoa.ca, and we'll listen to some music on the way out that Joe so kindly selected for us.